let's go back to Donald Trump, who pulled out of a deal.
The estimates in billions.
It was during Donald Trump's administration that Iran treated and talked about America's military and military service people, calling them suckers and losers.
So there are 3 reasons why Fox News anchor Bret Baier just ended Kamala Harris's campaign. By now, I'm sure you have heard that she sat down for that heated interview. She was angry. She was combative. She clearly had a fatal case of Trump derangement syndrome, which we're going to get into later in this video. But what I want to dive deep on and react to are some of the questions that Bret Baier asked her that I think is going to be damaging, because if there were independents or undecided voters or Republicans who don't want to support Trump, you will get to see by the end of this video why she failed to gain their support. Let's start with the first thing: zero accountability. Check out this exchange.
I hear you.
But actually is focused on fixing it.
6 Democrats voted against that bill. It would have allowed 1.8 million illegal immigrants into the country a year. A lot of conservatives had a problem with it. These are the 6 Democrats. But more importantly, back to the original premise, Jocelyn Nungari, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before a negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Bret,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There is no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice President.
To ensure that no future harm would occur.
Okay, so let me read you the transcript and why I say this zero accountability point. He clearly asked her for a second time during that exchange, do you owe those families an apology? You know what she says? Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. Not, you know what, Bret Baier? You're right. We are sorry that that happened to Laken Riley's family. I want to say I apologize to the parents and the damage that has been left because of what these crazy animals did. Something of that nature, right? No, she didn't do that. She should have did that, but she didn't do that.
Do you owe those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all, those are tragic cases. There's no question about that.
So there's 0 ounce of humility. She wasn't humble. There should have been some level of leadership. She keeps trying to run on this idea that she offers a new generation of leadership. Well, where's the humility in that? And furthermore, Bret has to play the clip from the mother crying, sharing her story about how an illegal migrant killed her loved one. And that was finally what forced Kamala Harris to at least say the word sorry, but not I'm sorry to you. I'm sorry for your loss. Like every average person will say that.
I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early days. So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I am so sorry for her loss. Sincerely.
You're supposed to be the vice president of the United States. This was part of your administration. Can you offer anything more than that? Can you have some compassion? Absolutely not. So if I'm an independent or I'm a disgruntled Republican and I'm saying Trump doesn't take responsibility for what happened on January 6th, I'm stuck because she's not taking any responsibility for the border. And that is an indictment on whether or not people can trust her as commander-in-chief to keep the border secure. Now, on that point about trust, half of America trusts Donald Trump. And the way that she handles that question is also terrible. Watch.
Those are the facts.
Why do you think more people say they trust him on the economy than they trust you?
I think that when you look at an analysis of our plans for what we would do as President of the United States, it has been clear to those who study and understand how economic policy works that moving forward, because I do believe the American people are ready to turn the page on the divisiveness and the type of rhetoric that has come out of Donald Trump. People are ready to chart a new way forward, and they want a president who has a plan for the future and a plan that is sound and will strengthen our country. My plan for the economy does exactly that. His plan would be, again, to give tax cuts to billionaires and the biggest corporations in our country and blow up our deficit.
Now, this was actually an easy question, but I think she's too smart for her own good, or she's too worked up about Trump that she didn't answer the question properly. And what I mean by that is he's just simply asking her, why are people supporting Trump so much? And she starts babbing off all this big words about these economists and these universities, and regular voters don't give a shit about that. What she should have said was, you know what? We've done everything we could to respond to the crisis of COVID. We tried to get inflation down. I think there's some areas we could have did a better job at. I have learned from what we should do differently. If I become president, that's what I'm going to take into my presidency. She didn't do that. And she's refusing to say what she's going to do that is different. So when he asked her about why do people trust Trump, she doesn't have an answer because she can't argue with the results.
That
Vice President, more than
turning the
70% of people
That is
tell
about
pollsters,
turning the page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Brett.
more than
People
70%
are
of people
exhausted.
tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade,
She knows that under his administration, things were better. And under the administration between her and Joe Biden, things are not better. Now, they are better for super wealthy. They are better for the bigger corporations. It has been better for these donors and these elites. Yeah, absolutely. But the working class, farmers, blue collars, low income individuals, they have taken a beating because of inflation. And by her not acknowledging that, once again, there's no ounce of humility during this entire interview. It's not going to land for those people because they're looking for what they don't see in Trump, right? They say, well, Trump isn't humble. Trump won't accept responsibility for January 6th. Trump won't do this. Trump won't do that. And during this interview, she was no better if I'm using the same logic that they use when they try to judge Trump. And again, she goes on to a stage during her rallies and say, all Trump does is talk about his grievances. What did you do during this entire video? You talked about your grievances with Trump and what's wrong with Trump. You didn't talk about what you're going to do for people and address why is it that people trust Trump when it comes to the economy or immigration. She doesn't want to go down that road, just like she doesn't want to go down the road of throwing Joe Biden under the bus. Watch.
It's interesting you said turn the page, Madam Vice President. You were asked on 2 different shows last week what, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden. Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
there is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
You're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes in to office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership.
Yeah. So did she answer the question? No. She gave an empty answer at best once again. And to really bring this point home on this, just think about this for a second. All she has to say is that there are things that Joe Biden did that I would do differently. I would do the Afghanistan thing differently. I would probably manage the border differently. I would do this or that differently. She only has to say it once. And then she could also praise him in the same sentence. That's the interesting part about it.
I, for example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business sector, and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make about, for example, my plan for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing, addressing the issue of small businesses, which is about working with the private sector to bring more capital and access to capital to our small business leaders, including my plan for a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and for small businesses, extending the tax deduction from $5,000 to $50,000.
We've heard a lot about those plans in recent days. Your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years. So what are you turning the page from?
And again, you're trying to tell people, it's a double binding message. She's trying to tell people she represents a new generation of leadership. Yeah, but you're not specifying what is the difference in your leadership between you and Joe Biden. You're not saying any of that, right? And so it's okay to say something that is of criticism or a mistake or something you would do differently. I just find the arrogance, or she's out of touch with how important that is for voters out there who are on the fence. It's just crazy. So maybe it's still wrapped up in the accountability thing. Maybe it's just still wrapped up that she has no empathy during this interview or an ounce of humility. But the bottom line is this. She failed to answer that question every step of the way during her campaign. And this is nothing new. And it's only going to work against her because the narrative in the media is exactly what I'm saying. So she loses on this narrative. She doesn't win. She doesn't gain anything on this narrative. People don't want to see more Joe Biden policies. The other thing that I felt will end her campaign, because, Bret Baier did allow her, I guess, in a sense, to do this. Maybe he did it directly or indirectly, is how much time she spent blaming former President Trump for pretty much everything. Watch.
Learned about that bill and told them to kill it because he preferred to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed.
So what are you turning the page from?
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we've been burdened with the kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump. And in fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish the American people. He's the one who talks about an enemy within it. Let's go back to Donald Trump, who pulled out of a deal that would have actually put Iran in check.
The estimates in billions.
It was during Donald Trump's administration that Iran treated and talked about America's military and military service people, calling them suckers and losers,
Hamas,
has diminished the significance.
Okay, so I counted about 31 times that Donald Trump's name was mentioned during this interview. Bret Baier accounted for about 10 of them. She comes in at about 21. And then obviously she talks about him without actually saying his name. And so this brings me to why she just ended her campaign. And I felt that Bret Baier, whether he did this directly or indirectly, she went on too much about Trump. So every question that he asked her, she just totally dismissed the question. She didn't even acknowledge the question in most cases. And she immediately pivoted to blaming Trump, that Trump is doing this, that Trump is doing that, and that voters need to know this about Trump. And here's the problem. back in 2020, this worked, right? This worked. But in 2024, people are desensitized. That's one. And two, people are exhausted. They're not exhausted of Trump. They're exhausted of how you guys continue to speak about Trump. You guys spend more time speaking about him versus speaking about the policies that are actually going to help everyday Americans. And that is a fatal mistake, in my opinion, in her campaign. Why? Because she is a candidate that people don't know. She's not Gavin Newsom. People know Gavin Newsom. They are aware of his name. They've seen his face. He's been on the news plenty of times. He could speak off the cuff, which means that he could probably do more rallies, more interviews, more adversarial interviews in just 24 hours than she ever could. So in my opinion, whether Bret Baier intended to do this or not, I think it looks bad on her that she spent all that time attacking Trump when that's the very thing that she accuses Trump of doing, which is he's always attacking the Democrats. So which one is it, right? And if you offer a new generation of leadership, why would you spend that amount of time blaming Trump? Now, I know the answer is because I think in her mind, if she doesn't know the answer to the question, the best thing to do is just blame Trump. And that's my opinion. So why do you guys believe that Bret Baier from Fox News just ended Kamala Harris's campaign? The way that he asked the questions, you think that impacted the interview? Do you see what I see, where there was zero accountability? She wanted to blame Trump for everything, and she had no answer on why voters trust Trump, and she had no humility. Tell me what your thoughts are and more in the comment section below. Now, if you missed my initial reaction to when this interview launched, all you have to do is click on that video because it's coming up right now.